They were loud. They were unpredictable. And for a time, they were impossible to ignore. But have you ever wondered what really happens when the cameras stop? When the shouting fades, the chaos disappears, and real life quietly takes over. Because the story of Lizard Lick Towing did not end when the show went off air. In many ways, that was when the real story began. The rise of a television phenomenon. Let's go back to 2011. Cable television was still a powerful force in American homes, and networks were locked in a battle to create shows that felt raw, immediate, and impossible to look away from. Viewers wanted drama that felt unfiltered. They wanted real people, real conflict, and situations that seemed like they could explode at any second. Right in the middle of that wave came Lizard Lick Towing, a series built around something that sounded almost too ordinary to become a hit, a small-town repossession business in North Carolina. But what unfolded on screen was anything but ordinary. The setting itself played a huge role in the show's appeal. Lizard Lick was not a polished city neighborhood or a glamorous location with flashing lights and expensive cars. It was a rough-edged slice of rural America, where dusty roads, crowded lots, and stubborn locals created a backdrop that felt authentic and alive. This was a world where every job could turn into a confrontation, and every confrontation could spiral into something bigger. Who would have guessed that a tow yard could become the center of so much attention? Week after week, viewers tuned in to watch heated arguments, roadside standoffs, and tense vehicle recoveries from people who were not eager to hand over the keys. There was always the sense that something unexpected could happen at any moment. A routine repossession might turn into a shouting match. A simple conversation might become a full-scale showdown. And that unpredictability became the show's greatest strength. At its peak, the series drew millions of viewers per episode. That kind of audience does not happen by accident. People were not only interested in the business itself, they were fascinated by the personalities behind it. They wanted to know who these people were when the tension rose, when tempers flared, and when everything seemed to be on the edge of collapse. So what was it that made the show so unforgettable? Was it the repossessions? The arguments? The characters? Or was it the feeling that, for once, television had found a place that seemed raw enough to be real? Ron Shirley was at the center of it all. Loud, commanding, and impossible to overlook. He had the kind of presence that filled every room he entered. He did not need to raise his voice to be noticed, because the energy followed him naturally. He came across as a man who expected respect and rarely backed down from a challenge. But beneath the bluster was a business owner trying to keep control in a world where control was constantly slipping away. Amy Shirley brought a different kind of strength. She was steady where others were volatile, practical where others were emotional, and sharp enough to keep a situation from getting out of hand. In many ways, she was the anchor. While the world around her seemed to spin toward chaos, she often appeared to be the one holding everything together. Isn't that often the case in real life too? The loudest person gets the most attention, but the strongest one is sometimes the person quietly managing the entire storm. Then there was Bobby Brantley, whose unpredictable energy added another layer to the show's chemistry. He was the wild card, the one who could shift the mood of a scene in an instant. Whether he was joking, arguing, or jumping into the middle of an argument, he brought a kind of rough charm that made viewers pay attention. And when a show depends on tension and personality, chemistry matters more than almost anything else. Together, these three created something rare, a series that felt alive. It was messy, loud, and sometimes absurd, but it had a pulse. And audiences responded to that. Reality, or something else. As the show grew more popular, another question began to follow it everywhere. How much of what viewers saw was truly real, and how much was shaped for entertainment? That question has followed many so-called reality shows, but Lizard Lick Towing sparked especially intense curiosity because the world it portrayed felt so volatile. The business itself was real. The repossessions were real. The people were real. But over time, it became increasingly clear that not every dramatic moment unfolded exactly as it appeared on screen. Some scenes were reenacted. Some situations were heightened. Some confrontations were built for maximum tension. In other words, the show lived in that gray area between documentary and drama, where reality was not exactly false, but it was certainly not left untouched. The network even avoided labeling it as standard reality television, instead referring to it as actuality. That single word says a lot. It suggests a product that is grounded in real life, but edited, shaped, and presented in a way that makes it more compelling for an audience. And honestly, is that so different from what most television does? The line between truth and storytelling has always been blurry, and viewers often accept that as long as the result is entertaining. Still, once people begin to question what they are watching, the experience changes. Every argument looks a little more staged. Every pause feels a little more deliberate. Every dramatic beat invites doubt. Was that reaction spontaneous? Did that happen exactly as it seemed? Or was the scene designed to grab attention? And yet, does knowing the mechanics of a show really destroy its appeal? Or does it simply reveal the craft behind the curtain? For many fans, the answer was complicated. Even if some moments were amplified, the personalities were real, the environment was real, and the business was real. That blend was enough to make the series memorable. It did not need to be perfect. It just needed to be watchable. And in that sense, it absolutely was. Why the show really ended. By 2014, the television world had changed. Audiences were no longer as locked into cable schedules as they once were. Streaming was rising. Viewer habits were shifting. Networks were becoming more selective. The appetite for loud, chaotic, unscripted-style programming was still there, but competition had become fierce. New shows were constantly fighting for the same attention. When there are more choices than ever, even a popular series can start to lose momentum. Could a show that once felt fresh begin to feel familiar too quickly? That is part of what happened here. The end of Lizard Lick Towing was not marked by scandal, public disaster, or some dramatic behind-the-scenes collapse. There was no shocking betrayal that brought everything crashing down overnight. Instead, the show faded for a reason that is far more ordinary and maybe even more telling. Ratings declined, and the network moved in a different direction. But for fans, there was one change that stood out more than any other: the departure of Bobby Brantley. He was not just another face in the cast. He helped define the rhythm of the series. His energy brought unpredictability, humor, and tension all at once. When he left to pursue his own path, the balance shifted. A show built on chemistry can survive a lot, but losing a key piece often changes everything. Have you ever watched a group dynamic after one person leaves and immediately felt that something essential was missing? That was the feeling many viewers had. Without that spark, the show gradually lost part of what made it electric. The arguments were still there. The setting was still there. The business was still there. But the emotional current that once carried the series seemed weaker. The magic had changed. And then, quietly, it was over. No huge final chapter. No emotional farewell special. No dramatic closing scene that tied everything together with a neat bow. Just silence. What came after the spotlight? But silence is not the same as disappearance. For the people involved, life continued beyond the cameras. The tow yard still had to function. The people still had families, responsibilities, pressures, and routines. Fame may have faded, but work did not. That is the part of television stories audiences often do not think about. What happens to the people after the crowd moves on? What remains once the attention is gone? For the Shirley family and the world around them, the answer was simple. Life went back to being life. Less dramatic, perhaps, but more stable. More private. More real in the quiet way reality often is. And maybe that is why the story of Lizard Lick Towing still lingers in people's minds. It was never just about towing cars. It was about personality, pressure, conflict, and the strange kind of fame that comes from letting the world watch your daily chaos. It was about a place that looked ordinary until the cameras arrived and turned it into something larger than life. So when people ask what happened after the show ended, the answer is both simple and interesting. The spectacle stopped, but the lives behind it did not. The loud moments disappeared from television, but the people, the business, and the history all continued in the background. And that may be the most fascinating part of all. Because once the cameras are gone, what is left is not the performance. What is left is the truth of ordinary days, the weight of real choices, and the memory of a show that once made a small-town tow yard feel like the center of the country's attention. Was it reality? Was it entertainment? Or was it some complex mixture of both, a mirror reflecting life, but heightened for the camera? Perhaps that was always the point. What made Lizard Lick towing unforgettable wasn't that it provided neat answers or scripted resolutions. It was that it left viewers questioning what they had just seen long after the credits rolled. Some people remember the show for the high-energy chases, the confrontations, or the over-the-top personalities. But beneath the spectacle, there was a story of perseverance, struggle, and real-life drama that no television production could ever fully capture. Before the fame, the real story. Long before the television cameras, the adoring fans, and the social media clamor, there was a man with a truck. Ron Shirley wasn't born into fame, and he certainly didn't grow up with a roadmap to television stardom. In the early 1990s, his life took an unexpected turn. A football injury, severe enough to end his athletic aspirations, forced him to reconsider everything. Dreams of touchdowns and stadium lights were replaced by long nights and hard decisions. By 1998, Ron had transformed a single vehicle into a fledgling towing business. Each day brought a new lesson, a repossession that went wrong, a customer dispute, or a late-night call on a stormy highway. The work was grueling, but it was honest. No spotlight. No cameras. No guaranteed reward, just sheer persistence. And then there was Amy. Amy Shirley wasn't just Ron's partner in business. She was a force of nature. A competitive powerlifter whose strength was both literal and metaphorical, she brought an intensity and sharp intelligence that helped shape the company's operations. While Ron handled the heavy lifting and public persona, Amy orchestrated logistics, employee management, and strategy behind the scenes. Together, they were a perfect counterbalance, strength and strategy, impulse and foresight. Here's something worth considering. How often do we overlook the quiet, grueling years behind someone's eventual success? Television viewers might have laughed at the antics, cheered the confrontations, or marveled at the recovery of a stolen vehicle, but few saw the hundreds of unseen hours that went into building Lizard Lick towing into something sustainable. The show captured a fragment of their lives, a snapshot. But reality, as always, was far more layered. Life after the cameras. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, life didn't pause for the cast. Fame faded, but the people behind the personas continued to live, adapt, and face challenges that no producer could script. Bobby Brantley, one of the most recognizable faces from the show, encountered what would become one of life's harshest tests, a brain tumor diagnosed in 2019. Surgery and recovery marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that shifted his priorities toward family. Raising 8 children in a world without constant camera attention demanded patience, dedication, and a reorientation of identity. It was a reminder that public recognition pales in comparison to the private challenges that shape us. What does it truly take to rebuild your life after facing a threat to your very existence? Others forged their own paths. Big Juicy embraced fatherhood and community involvement, proving that grounding oneself in real relationships can be far more fulfilling than fleeting fame. Crazy Dave turned toward music, channeling creativity and emotion into something enduring, while Cousin Johnny quietly stepped away from public life, living in anonymity and privacy. These stories underscore a truth rarely explored in reality television. Behind every persona, there is a person. Behind every laugh, every dramatic confrontation, every triumphant moment, there is a life shaped by struggle, growth, and change. A tragedy no one could prepare for. And then, in 2022, life's unpredictability struck in the harshest way imaginable. Harley Shirley, Ron's son, was tragically killed in a shooting at just 21 years old. The news shocked fans, friends, and the small community that had grown around the Shirley family. A single act of violence transformed years of stability and routine into a whirlwind of grief and uncertainty. For a family that had learned to endure public attention, this tragedy posed a different kind of challenge. It was deeply personal, raw, and beyond the reach of television dramatization. How does one move forward when someone so close is taken away so suddenly? How do you rebuild when the world you knew shatters in an instant? The legal aftermath was lengthy and complex, involving multiple arrests and court proceedings that kept the family in the public eye once again, but under circumstances far grimmer than reality TV could ever capture. Lives were changed forever, not just for the Shirleys, but for everyone connected to the tragedy. Yet in the midst of unimaginable loss, Ron's response was extraordinary. He chose to speak publicly about faith, forgiveness, and resilience. Not anger, not revenge, not bitterness, but endurance. His words became a testament to human strength and an example of confronting pain without succumbing to hatred. It's a kind of strength that cameras cannot capture, a quiet heroism far removed from any scripted narrative. Where are they now? More than a decade after the show ended, the story continues, just without the cameras. Ron and Amy Shirley still run Lizard Lick Towing. What began as a single-vehicle operation has grown into a thriving business with a full fleet and a team of dedicated employees. Social media has allowed them to maintain a connection with fans, demonstrating that genuine personalities can outlast the platforms that initially made them famous. Isn't it fascinating how authenticity can endure when spectacle fades? The crew remains mostly connected, each pursuing paths that reflect their personal priorities rather than the need for public validation. The business stands as a testament to perseverance, adaptability, and long-term vision. And perhaps most importantly, the legacy of what they built together, through struggle, triumph, tragedy, and endurance, remains alive. The bigger picture. So what can we take from all of this? Lizard Lick Towing wasn't just a reality show about towing cars or dramatic confrontations. It was a window into something deeper, the messy, unpolished, and unpredictable nature of ambition, struggle, success, loss, and resilience. The show highlighted the rapid rise of fame, the fleeting nature of public attention, and the quiet, often unseen labor that sustains a real business. It reminded viewers that life continues, regardless of whether cameras are rolling. And it raised questions that linger long after the show. What happens to people after the cameras are gone? How do individuals reconcile public perception with private reality? When tragedy strikes, what strength carries us forward? And perhaps the most profound question of all, when the spotlight fades, what truly remains? For Ron and Amy Shirley, the answer is simple yet profound. It's not the fame. It's not the show. It's the life they built before any cameras arrived and the resilience to keep moving forward when the cameras left. It's the relationships they nurtured, the business they grew, the community they touched, and the courage to face tragedy with grace and endurance. So, the next time you watch a reality series, ask yourself, how much of what you see is entertainment, and how much is a reflection of true human experience? How often do we forget the human lives behind the spectacle, the years of effort before success, and the struggles that never make it to air? In the end, Lizard Lick Towing wasn't just a show about towing cars, it was a story about life itself, its unpredictability, its challenges, and its enduring capacity for hope. And perhaps that is why the story continues to resonate today, inviting each of us to reflect on our own journeys, the obstacles we face, and the legacies we hope to leave behind. Because when the cameras fade and the episodes end, what remains is not the spectacle. It's the strength of those who continue, quietly, courageously, and authentically, every single day.